Hi, this is CJ Gant with Growing Every Day. When we're trying to figure out life and love and relationships, oftentimes we start at the wrong places. We start usually at the external places. We start with our employer, or we start with our siblings, or we start with our situations, or we start with our parents, or we start with our children, or with our spouses, which takes us to the if onlys, the lonely land of the if onlys. Here is what I mean. We end up at, if only someone would offer me a better job and give me a chance. If only my sister would stop acting as if she's better than the rest of us. If only my parents would stop treating me like a child and trying to run my life. If only my children would show me more appreciation. If only my husband would pay more attention to me. If only my wife would follow my leadership in the home. If only these things would happen, then my life would be better. If only these things externally would change, then life for me will change. Well, while there may be some validity in that statement, in those statements, over time those statements are harmful if we want to grow and flourish as God would have us grow and flourish. Because those statements, the if onlys, they only serve to reinforce our internal spiritual and emotional deficiencies. The if onlys just keep us stuck in our spiritual and emotional struggles, which is why I'm here to share with you today the external circumstances and the people in your life and those you love relationally. That's the wrong place to start if we want to grow. You may not realize it because here's the problem. If I've always thought a way, if I've always believed a thing, then it seems normal to me. So for all of us, our thought processes always seem very reasonable to us, right? So when I was living out of my dysfunction, out of my desperate need for validation and affirmation, I didn't realize it. I thought my thought processes were normal. And yet, how I perceived the world, how I reacted to the way I perceived the world, was destroying my life. So, the way we perceive the outside world, until we take the journey that God asks us to take in spiritual and emotional growth, the way we perceive the world is shaded, and it's unfortunately inaccurate because our filter is dirty. You know, David in Psalm 109, he spends the first 20 verses pleading to the Lord, telling the Lord about how horrible the people were around him, and how he had been the great person, the good person, and everyone was accusing him and not treating him fairly. But then David says in Psalms 109, verse 21, "But you, sovereign Lord, help me for your name's sake. Out of the goodness of your love, deliver me, for I am poor and needy, and my heart is wounded within me." So there was something in David that recognized that even though all these things externally seemed to be an issue for him and caused him pain, he also noticed that there was something internally that needed to be repaired, his wounded heart. When I was spending some time with the Lord one Saturday morning, I wrote these notes as God spoke to me regarding this issue of wounded hearts and where to start in our growth journey. I wrote to myself, sometimes in conversation, sometimes in conflict, sometimes when we're trying to figure out this cruel world, we hear what we've always heard, we see what we've always seen, as opposed to what is actually said, as opposed to what actually is. When we have deeply wounded parts, which we all do to some degree, when we all have deeply wounded parts that we have not allowed God to restore, the important things in life we interpret and perceive through the window of our wounds, which makes these things easier to digest because we take them in, run them through our filter, and make them digestible. We make them familiar. So, even if we interpret an event improperly, even if we interpret a conflict in the wrong way, in a way that causes us pain and sorrow, we will tend to stick with our interpretation because through the window of our wounds, it's the only interpretation that makes sense to us. The window of your wounds is that vehicle through which you see the world. It's the filter that I run everything through. I'll give you an example. Not too long ago, last week, in fact, I was riding in the car with my wife, and she shared something with me, and we weren't communicating well on the subject, and so we went back and forth a few times, and then I began to escalate for some reason, and my voice level went up, and I remember my wife saying to me, "Well, God, what's wrong with you?" And after that conversation was over, we made up quickly. But I was thinking to myself, where did that come from? And why did I escalate? Because in reality, what she was sharing with me wasn't an issue that required escalation at all. So it wasn't the external thing that was the issue, it was the internal thing, that filter through which I ran that event. You know, my pastor, Kevin Myers, gave an example of this many, many months ago in a sermon. He took a bottle of Coca-Cola and he took a bottle of water, and he shook them both vigorously, and then he opened them both. And of course, the Coca-Cola went all over the place, and the water, nothing happened. And his point was, it wasn't what happened to the bottles, it was what was inside that made the difference. So my question for you is, what's inside that's making the difference? What filter are you running all of life through? So the argument you had with your husband, the disagreement you had with your wife, was the disagreement really the issue? Or perhaps was it your perception of the disagreement, the filter through which you ran the disagreement, the window through which you saw the disagreement. We all do this. We all have this internal filter through which we run life events. And it's dirtied, it's soiled by this construction of it from the past. So that filter, that window, is constructed in early childhood, from birth to about 7, 8, 9 years old. Once you reach about 9 years old, how you perceive the world is in large part done. It's completed. Can it change? Yes. But it takes work. And that's why I do these videos, to encourage you, to encourage us to do the work with the help of God, with 3 or 4 or 7 people you can trust, to sit down and share those wounds from the past, to talk them through, to work them through, to understand how they affect how you perceive your current situations. Once you understand that, your window will become more clear. Your filter through which you perceive the world will become less dirty, and you'll begin to see things more clearly. It all starts with you. It all starts with me. Maybe that's why Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, "You hypocrite, first remove the log from your own eye, then you might see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." The place to start is here, in your heart, in my heart. It's the only thing we have control over. It's the only thing we can change. We can change how we perceive the world. We can change how we see ourselves. We can change how we relate with others if we're just willing to do a little bit of difficult work that will put us on the path that God intends so that we can have flourishing lives. That's it for today. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this reminder that it's not so much what's going on externally that is troubling. It's really what we're built of, what we're constructed of internally, how we perceive the world. Lord, help us to begin the journey of examining why we see certain things certain ways, why we hear certain information in certain ways. Help us to understand that the temper we have, or the lust that we deal with, or the control issues that we have, how that all is connected to our perception of life events, our perception of how the world operates. And that perception has been constructed a long time ago. Help us to go there and to examine so that we can be all you intend for us to be. Amen. Hey, if you have a question or a comment, you can reach me. You can email me at cjgant@growingeveryday.net. cjgant@growingeveryday.net. I look forward to your questions, your comments. You can tell me I'm crazy, it's okay. All right, I'll see you guys next week. And we'll have a special guest next week as well. Love you guys. Bye.